And here I am joined by the incredible Dr. Stephen Christie. We're going to be talking about an incredibly important and very good book. You're going to be able to find a link right down there by the time you're watching the show. The book is called Speaking for the Unborn, 30-second pro-life rebuttals to pro-choice arguments. And to me, this is such an incredible book. Dr. Christie, thank you very much for joining me. How are you?
I'm great. I'm really glad to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm really thrilled to have you join us because there are not a whole lot of books out there, particularly like this book. But before we dive in and talk about this incredible book that you wrote, I'd like to ask you, what is it that you do? Are you an apologist? You're also a doctor. What is it that you do in your everyday life?
Yeah, my normal life, I'm a physician. I'm a radiologist. I spend about half my time doing cancer work and about half my time doing GI gastrointestinal work. That's my normal life beside being a married father, 5 kids, and the normal chaos of our normal lives.
Incredible, 5 children. You are incredibly blessed. That is amazing.
Absolutely.
Now, I guess the bigger question would be, how do you remain sane?
You're assuming that I am sane. I am not sane at all, and I can only do any of this is because I listen to my wife. She's very strong and much brighter than I am.
Incredible.
I think I agreed to 2 children when we first got married. Thank goodness I didn't listen to her.
Yes, no doubt. That truly is incredible. But you know, that's what an incredible blessing. How many boys and girls, if you don't mind me asking?
We have 3 boys and 2 girls from age 27 down to 15. The oldest 2 got married this past year. Not to each other, but they both got married. COVID weddings, but all's well that ends well here. Yeah,
no doubt. And God willing, pretty soon you'll be a grandpa.
We're hoping so.
Yeah, incredible. I'm so happy for you. Now, on that very same topic, talking about life and bringing life into the world, this is a very relevant book for our times and wondering how appropriate for the time that we're living in right now. As you know very well, news leaked that perhaps Roe v. Wade would be overturned. So that is, I guess, still a little bit up in the air, but very relevant to our times. This incredible book that you've written. I'd like to ask you, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I guess there's 2 reasons I would say I wrote the book. The pithy answer is that there's 62 million reasons why I wrote the book. 62 million abortions in the U.S. alone since Roe. And that's, as a perspective, that's more than the populations of California and New York combined. And I say, if what's being aborted isn't alive, it's not human, then it really doesn't matter. But if those abortions are of living human beings, then we've killed 62 million kids. And that's really why I wrote the book. I guess the other reason I wrote the book, and as you said about the Dobbs case, is I've always said the pro-life cause really is a winning one. And we have to be able to articulate our very powerful and very persuasive reasons to anyone who asks. And simply knowing that abortion is wrong, well, that's important to know. But if that's all you know, it's not enough to sustain the movement. And like you, I'm sure, I'd stumbled across so many wonderful pro-life arguments based on science and the law and reason, morality, social justice concerns. And I thought it was time to organize and compile them and edit them into one source and put them in a user-friendly format where you can actually bring them into real-life discussions or debates or the normal circumstances you find yourself in every day.
Well, I'd have to commend you. I think you did an incredible job. And the one thing that I'll be very honest with you, what really does captivate me, I like being able to pick up a book that I can dive into and recommend to people in the everyday pews and parishes, books that I know they're going to love and enjoy. And what I was really surprised about, I guess it's sad that I'm surprised, is that you have no problem tackling the toughest issues. And that's great. Now, why is it sad that I'm surprised? Because we're living in a time and age where a lot of people don't want to tackle the tough topics that you do tackle in this book. And you do an incredible job tackling them. We're living in a time right now where you have people, I was watching a video just earlier, where there are people that are advocating for pro-choice, and they were also claiming to be very devout Catholics. That's very shocking to me. So these are very confusing times that we're living in. The book really does challenge that. And I think one of the very clear things you do bring out is that abortion. You bring out that abortion really, as tough as it may sound, Is there any way getting around the fact that this really is ultimately murder? Isn't that correct?
You know, what's really encouraging and what's wonderful about our position, the pro-life position, is that we simply rely on facts and truth and science. The pro-choice position, sadly, has to rely on cliches. They have to rely on rhetorical deception or personal attacks. And if you approach it properly, if you approach it with a kindness and compassion and patience, and don't get hot under the collar immediately when you're discussing this with these people, facts, truth, and science win out. They do. We have to be patient. It may take a long time, and the Dobbs decision may be, one of these big wins that we've had. We'll see. But I really do firmly believe that this is a winning cause, because facts, truth, and science outweigh cliches, deception, and personal attacks any day of the week. So I think we should be very optimistic and very excited for the times we're in right now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. We really should be excited for the times that we're in right now. And one other thing that I really appreciate about your book is the fact that the message in there is a biblically Christian message at its core. But not only that, Dr. Christie, but even if we, for the moment, because the other day I was dialoguing with someone, and they said, well, immediately they approached me. They said, okay, do you identify as a Republican or Democrat? I said, look, we don't need to use political labels when talking about defending the unborn. And if we remove that kind of the political labeling of Dr. Christie, and we examine what is happening here, the fact that each of these unborn they don't have a voice to speak up for themselves. They have their own unique DNA. They've got their own set of limbs. They are alive. They cannot speak up for themselves. And what is really being put forth by the pro-choice movement is in my opinion, an atrocity. What are your thoughts on that? First off, how do we define abortion? Because I know in your book you do provide a very concise and intellectual definition of what it is.
Yeah, for me, I keep the language very clear and simple. It's the intentional killing of an unborn child. And I go through the definition of the book, why we use the word child. Merriam-Webster defines child as a born or unborn person. But as you were talking about, one of the things I think that's interesting about this book, maybe I'm tooting my own horn, is it's unique from two perspectives. One, just the structure and scope of the book is unique. There are wonderful pro-life books out there that I depended on when writing this and have quoted them and sourced them throughout my book. Randy Alcorn comes to mind, a fantastic Bible of the pro-life arguments. But this book is these 30-second pithy rebuttals to every pro-choice argument. They're clear, they're concise, they're persuasive. And again, they're put in a way that you don't have to memorize them, but you can remember them sort of as bullet points. So you can use them in real life discussions. Yeah. That's the first unique thing. But I think the other thing is that it has to do with my background. And as a physician, I've studied science and I've studied embryology, and I'm a lawyer. So I've studied the law and the Constitution. As a father of 5, I know at least a bit about babies in pregnancy. And as a husband of over 25 years, I know the challenges women face in the struggle balancing the demands of their career and family life. But what I think is most interesting about me in particular are none of those things. What's interesting and what I think makes me most qualified to speak about abortion is the fact that I spent over 30 years of my life as a secular pro-choice liberal. So I know exactly what, why, and how the other side thinks about abortion. I've lived in both those worlds and have a unique vantage point from which to address the issues. I like to say that when I was pro-choice, that I learned the arguments, but when I became pro-life, I learned the truth. And that's what this book is. The book is this truth.
Dr. Christie, one of the very common snapbacks arguments, if you will come from individuals on the pro-choice side, where they will then snap back and say, well, look, we don't want this to be overturned, Roe v. Wade. We don't want abortion to be illegal because, look, you have no say as to what happens to my body. Why do you want control over a woman's body? Now, how do we reply to that, Dr. Christie? Is that a long, complicated response, or can we provide a concise reply?
Yeah, so I could give you the 30-second response, but I'll give you a little of the background on how I approach it usually. So the classic argument, my body, my choice, in the category of a woman's autonomy. And so I discuss the my body part and I discuss the my choice part. And what I try to do is agree with them where we can agree with them. So when they say my body, I say I fully support the right of a woman to do whatever she wants with her own body. I just don't think she has the right to do whatever she wants to someone else's body. And a pregnancy always involves two bodies, sometimes more. So that's why I try to agree with them and I bring it to the next point. And then on the my choice thing, I say, yes, a woman should have the right to choose. I agree completely. The choice she has, though, is not whether or not to kill her baby. It's whether or not to have sex in the first place. And when a woman chooses to have sex, she does so with the knowledge that there's a real possibility she may create a new living human being inside her. And it's reasonable then for society to expect that woman who consented to that risk to live temporarily with inconvenience, even significant inconvenience, if the only alternative is killing a child. So I say that I'm also very pro-choice with just one less choice than you. I believe you can choose abstinence, you can choose motherhood, or you can choose adoption. I just don't believe you can choose to kill your baby. We have that old expression, the right to swing your fist ends just before it touches my nose.
Now, Dr. Christie, you tell me what you think about this, because you are incredibly qualified because you know the arguments of the other side. But another one way in which I reply, and I'm nowhere near the level of being an expert as you are in this particular field, the one thing that I am compelled to reply immediately is that the pro-life movement is more pro-woman than the other side, because you are supporting bringing whether it be female, a lot of the times I'm sure it is, or male life into the world, whereas the other side is in support of snuffing out the possibility of that life. Now, do they have a cogent response to that, or do you find it lacking?
No, there's a couple of arguments they make. So especially you and I are men in this world, so they yell at us that we're misogynists, we're anti-women. And I simply say, I'm not anti-woman, I'm just anti-killing. And in fact, as you point out, since nearly 500,000 baby girls are aborted each year in the U.S. alone, our position is fiercely pro-woman. And that's a short, pithy, 15-second argument. I think these arguments, again, it's very hard. The only thing they can do is yell at us. You're a misogynist. Apparently I hate my wife and daughters, right? When they say I'm a misogynist. They try to say that no uterus, no opinion, they say for us men. And in those cases, I always echo the words of Martin Luther King and Abraham Lincoln, that it's cowardly and immoral to permit anyone to silence you on critical moral issues based on your skin color or your religion or your sex. And arguments to the contrary are bigoted, racist, and sexist. There's lots of arguments they use about men against women, and they say, well, this is an example of men subjugating women. And we point out that's nonsense, that opinion polls show that actually men are less opposed to abortion than women, that the majority of pro-life workers and volunteers are women, not men. And the leader of nearly every national pro-life group is a woman. So the notion that pro-life movement is a weapon used by men is pure fiction. So those are those categories of men versus women.
Yeah, and I would like to add, the way you have the book broken down, and again, by the time people are tuning in, there'll be a link right down there. People will be able to check out that incredible book. Speaking for the Unborn, 30-second pro-life rebuttals to pro-choice arguments by Dr. Christie. People will be able to check it out. I really like the way you've broken it down. You have a number of categories, and really the popular arguments, the ones that you're going to hear all the time, you have it broken down, how to reply to them. And I find it fantastic. One particular category was category 1. And this one you hear it so often. And you work in the field of science, you are incredibly well equipped to reply to the claim that, well, Dr. Christie, or well, William, this is not a human life. This is not a person, depending on when you abort the child. So if it's very early on, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a human yet. It's not a human life. Now, Dr. Christie, is there any merit to that kind of an argument? Is it permissible to have it early on then, or how do you reply to that?
Yeah, this is the category of it's not alive, or it's not a person, or it's not a human. And these are arguments that the pro-choice movement lost years ago. Whether or not something is alive is not a matter of philosophy or religion or politics. It's a purely scientific question that science has fully settled. And it's spelled out in nearly every embryology book and every biology book used at every medical school throughout the world. And there's overwhelming scientific consensus that from the moment of conception, an embryo fulfills all the criteria of biological life. So what they're trying to call a mere clump of cells is by definition a living human being. And there's even surveys that are fantastic. The largest survey ever done on this subject was a year and a half ago. Over 5,000 biologists at over 1,000 worldwide institutions were asked, does human life begin at conception? And a full 96% agreed that life begins at conception. And the pro-choice world was very upset. They said this must be a biased study. And they're right, it was biased, but it's biased against the pro-life cause because these biologists self-described themselves as 89% liberal, 85% pro-choice, and 63% non-religious. So I say let's stick to the most basic scientific fact in this debate. Life begins at conception. So again, these are multiple layers of arguments you can use. We could use any one of the three I just gave you.
Yeah, and I'd like to add again that your book does allow for you to not only dig in deep, but to provide quick replies, because that really is what is needed when you get bombarded with all kinds of questions and attacks from the other side, especially the one that I've heard very often, Dr. Christie. I hear it all the time whenever anyone pro-life attempts to stand up for the unborn. If they are a male, they're accused of being a misogynist immediately, not caring about women's rights. And that's the number one claim I hear is that, well, look, the pro-choice movement are doing the most for women's rights. They are, really sticking their neck out for women's rights. Well, I've got to be quite honest. I don't see how they're doing the most for women's rights when they're cutting off the life of the child. Really doesn't make sense.
Absolutely. And one of the other statistics that we should be aware of is a lot of times they say, we only care for especially this last 2 days you hear this, we only care for babies when they're inside the uterus, inside the womb.
Right.
And I always point out, I say the conservatives, the pro-lifes, and the religious donate more of their time, more of their money to the poor, to pregnant women, and to babies than do the pro-choice, the secular, and the liberal. So the idea that somehow the liberal pro-choice people are more concerned with babies when they donate less of their time and less of their money absolutely makes no sense. It doesn't hold up, and it's a fact we should all know. And the religious and conservatives adopt 5 times as many babies as the pro-choice and the secular world do. So those arguments are nonsense, and just point out the facts for them. Just point out the facts. They donate less of their time, their money, and adopt fewer babies. How is that caring for the poor?
Now, you do bring up a very, very good point there, because that will be another argument you hear brought up very, very often. I'm very glad that you do touch upon it in the book. That other argument being, well, look, how can you want a woman that is poverty-stricken to bring a child into the world just to suffer? Isn't it better to just terminate that before that child comes into a suffering world? Now, I find that to be a very, it's a terrible argument that they pose, to advocate murder rather than advocating bringing the life into the world and seeking assistance and what have you. But I'm sure you've heard that kind of an argument before, haven't you?
Sure. So these are the categories of it's best for an unwanted baby, and it's best for a woman who feels burdened. And the argument we say about it being best for unwanted babies, that it's never an act of love or fairness or compassion to kill someone simply because they're unwanted. How could killing an unborn baby, literally dismembering the baby while in the womb, ever be for his own benefit? It's the most uncompassionate, unkind, unloving thing you can do to a child, to kill him. And what they're saying is that it's better to eliminate the sufferer than to eliminate the suffering. Instead of improving foster care or the adoption process, we could just kill the child. And how did killing a child ever become an act of kindness? I like to say that solutions based on killing innocent living human beings are never acceptable. So that's the best for the unwanted baby argument. The burden on women argument is, I acknowledge again where I can acknowledge and agree. I do. I said, yes, having a baby can be terribly inconvenient, but when did it become okay to kill a living human being because we can't afford him or her? or because the child might interfere in our own personal plans. If it's unacceptable to kill a baby, the minute after she's born, it's also unacceptable to kill her before she's born, because being a burden on someone is never justification for killing them. And I always, there's a lot of these arguments you can point out that when we're talking about a baby's rights and a mother's rights, you have to discuss the actual rights we're talking about. So we're talking about the mother's right to a certain lifestyle for her a temporary inconvenience on her lifestyle versus the baby's actual right to stay alive, to live. And these two rights, lifestyle versus life itself, are simply not equal in moral weight. Life always trumps lifestyle.
Dr. Christie, no matter where I look in scripture, early church history, anywhere I look, it really does seem to me like the pro-choice movement is not compatible with the Christian faith. And I use, I know that's very tough language to use, but I'm not shutting them out of the faith. I'm saying that I hope that they have a conversion of heart to realize that abortion simply is against the law of God. And I think that really is at the heart of the issue, that if you are a professing Christian, you cannot support abortion. Isn't that correct?
Well, I can speak to Catholicism. I can speak to Christianity in general, but I can very specifically speak to Catholicism. You can just turn to the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It's absolutely 100% not acceptable to participate in any manner to have an abortion, to facilitate an abortion, to drive to somebody to get an abortion, to work in an abortion center. It is 100% unacceptable. And the idea of some of our Catholic leaders saying, I'm personally pro-life, but who am I to impose my views on another woman, on another human being? It's an absolute abomination. We impose our beliefs on other people, our moral beliefs on other people every day. That's what we do in a society. On critical moral issues like rape and child abuse or murder or theft, we never, ever rely on an individual's personal moral code to guide their actions. We say that rape and murder are repugnant, they're immoral, they're illegal, and if you do those things, we're throwing you in jail. And that's imposing morality, and we do it to every single member of society every single day. And when you say I shouldn't impose my views on other people, that's again nonsense. Can you imagine somebody saying, I'm personally against slavery? I would never, ever have a slave. But if you want a slave or two, that's your business. You decide if you want to have a slave or two. Who am I to impose my views? That's what we do in a civil society. We impose our views. We go to the polls and we impose our views because critical moral issues require us to impose our views for the decency of mankind.
There is no church that stands up for the dignity of human life like the Catholic Church. No church that defends the sanctity of marriage like the Catholic Church does. So those are fantastic points you bring up there, Dr. Christie. In your research when writing this very, very timely and important book, did you encounter perhaps writings or musings of great saints of old or great leaders and popes that perhaps echo the importance of realizing that all life is precious?
It's a great question, and I've probably been a little deficient in this regard, because in the book I actually say, which is interesting, and my wife, who's devoutly Catholic as well and very active in the pro-life movement, argues against this a little bit, but I say we avoid all religious arguments unless you happen to be speaking to a religious person. So there's beautiful quotes from our last 5 popes on this subject, including Pope Francis on this subject, who says abortionists are assassins.
Yeah.
So there is no doubt where the Catholic Church stands on it. But what's interesting to me, and I'm a wacky Catholic. I go to Mass every day. I do a rosary every day. I'm a crazy guy. But I say, do not bring those arguments, because the vast majority of abortion advocates are secular liberals who think that the religious are unsophisticated, unthinking, brainwashed, backwards, and intolerant Jesus freaks. So if you're debating a non-religious person and you've made 9 wonderful non-religious arguments in defense of the unborn, but then you happen to mention the word God or sin or sanctity of life, you'll see the face of the person you're speaking with change immediately. And you can tell you can read their mind and know what they're saying. And they're saying something like this: oh, Steve, I hadn't realized you're a freak. Have a nice day. And then all those wonderful, rational, non-religious arguments I made vanish. They're thrown out. So I always say we have compelling non-religious arguments based on science, the law, morality, social justice concerns. Let's stick to them. unless, of course, you're actually discussing in the religious realm. Catholics for Choice is a big group. It's a nonsense group. It's like saying I'm a vegetarian and eating a roast beef sandwich every day. You can call yourself a vegetarian, but if you're eating a roast beef sandwich every day, you might not be a vegetarian. But I also would say that my Catholic faith informs everything that I do. So when I'm going out to make my non-religious arguments, everything I do is informed by my Catholic faith.
Incredible, really, really incredible. And I think that that approach is a very important approach. And it really does remind me of the kind of approach I take when dialoguing with atheists, talking about the bodily resurrection of Christ. I don't approach them thinking that they're going to believe the Bible is the inspired word of God. You've got to use other approaches. Otherwise, you're going to turn them off. They're not going to listen. That is why this is an incredibly important book. I recommend people get a hold of Speaking for the Unborn, 30-second pro-life rebuttals, 2 pro-choice arguments. Dr. Christie, you've been so incredible. I've appreciated your time. Before we conclude, I'd like to give you a moment, as long as you'd like. Put in a plug on anything you may be working on. You have a webpage you want to direct people to, any other book, a page, anything. The floor is yours right now.
Hey, thank you very much. So the book can be found on Amazon. Speaking for the Unborn. If you like the book, please give it 5 stars. That helps through their algorithms. If you don't like the book, I always say, please give it 5 stars. The website, the website is as important as the book. It's speakingfortheunborn.org. It has a 4-part video teaching series, which discusses science and embryology, the constitutional law cases, animations of the various types of abortion procedures, 5 facts you need to know about Planned Parenthood, and strategies for participating in the pro-life movement. It has high-resolution photos and videos of the unborn that I've purchased the rights to, so you can download them to your phone. You can show them to your family and friends. So when somebody says at 12 weeks it's just a clump of cells, you can say, hey, you can make your arguments, or you can let the unborn speak for themselves and say, hey, do you mind me showing you just a little video of a 12-week baby? And tell me if you think that's a clump of cells. And these people will be shocked and horrified at what they thought was something that they thought was fully disposable is actually a living baby. So speakingfortheunborn.org, I think, is a fantastic resource. So the book and the website, and the last thing I would say is my final. You told me I had free reign here. Is that we have to have courage. My wife has more courage than anybody I know. She's out there all the time fighting in the pro-life cause. I'm a bit of a wimp. My tendency is to write the book and then put it out there in the world and hide. So coming on radio shows or podcasts or TV shows is not in my normal comfort zone. But I have to remember there's 62 million babies who would like me to speak on their behalf. And so I have to muster the courage to get out there and do my part. And your part may not be writing books or speaking at podcasts, but your job probably is in the everyday circumstances of your ordinary lives, speaking with your friends and your family and your coworkers who might happen to be pro-choice. And your job is to not always win arguments and stick them in the eye. Your job is to win hearts, which can be done by sticking to the science, the facts, and the truth, and presenting it in a conscientious and compassionate way.
And your book does do exactly that. And I know I want to put in one other plug. I have a physical copy of the book, but I know people will also wonder. I have a lot of people that tune in here that will say, well, I like to read on my Kindle. I like to read on my iPad. I want to also let the people know I also have an ebook copy. In fact, I'm looking at the ebook right now. I have an ebook copy. The pictures that Dr. Christie's talking about, they are there in the ebook copy as well. If whatever kind of book copy you want to get, physical copy or ebook, I recommend you get either one or get both the way I have. I'm going to provide a link right down there. Dr. Christie, thank you very much for your time. And I look forward to dialoguing with you again in the future. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on.
I'm grateful for the chance. Thank you so much.
God bless you. Thank you.